Hello everyone, the Skull Seeker here. Welcome to part 2 of my skull collection. Today we will be going over all of the fish. So part 1 was all of the mammals. However, since then I have quite a bit more mammals that were not featured in the video. But this time we're focusing on all the fish which we have in the background. We have, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. Probably kind of wrong, but around 21. So we'll probably do the shark jaws as a separate video to show off all the different kinds of teeth within the shark and ray jaws that I have for all the cartilaginous fish. But for now, approximately 20 ray fin fish. So yeah, we'll go through these. So we will start with the blue catfish, and the reason I'm doing that, we're going to go through by group. So the reason I'm doing the blue catfish first is because I have a perfect specimen that retains every single feature, and so that is important because it will let us essentially understand the other skulls from looking at this one. So that is the one back here. This guy here. So this is a blue catfish skull, and the blue catfish is the heaviest species of North American catfish. Very large fish. This one would have been around maybe 2.5 feet long. But anyway, this retains all the features of the skull and things that you would not see in some of the other skulls I have, or pretty much any of the other skulls I have, because this is a literal perfect specimen. The fins are taxidermied, so there's no smell. They're all clean. There's no gross anything. Yeah, so we have the dorsal fin, the pectoral fins. We have the dorsal fin spine and the pectoral fin spine. And then we can see this right here is the eye ring, which it's essentially this little piece of cartilage that wraps around here. You're never going to see this in any dead fish you ever find in the wild. This is essentially only going to be there in perfectly preserved specimens, top tier. This is the only time I've ever seen this anywhere. This is extremely rare. This is the barbel bone, the part that goes into the top barbel or whisker of the catfish. And we lift this. We have a front view here. You can see both of the eye rings kind of going around. You will see the teeth, which I guess I can bring this closer. So, and I'll have to use my finger to focus there. Okay, so all the teeth, you can see teeth on the top jaw, the bottom jaw. So lots of tooth pads. Once again, this is that barbel bone on each side, the eye ring. And then we have the pectoral fin spines, which appear to be slightly broken. So it's likely at some point the fin broke off and then it healed, because that's how catfish work. They can heal these spines. The dorsal fin spine there kind of curves backwards. It looks malformed. So we have vertebrae. We have these kind of floating vertebrae, which is really cool. And this piece right here, this is the complex vertebrae. Then this is essentially the neurocranium, this really long bone that covers the majority of the length of the skull. You can see it does have the gill arches intact in here, which is an extraordinary feat to preserve those. You can see from the back, there's the gill arches again. You can see these little pads right here. Those are teeth on the roof of the mouth. So if we can kind of see that, yeah, little teeth in there. From the front view, once again, you will see those tooth pads on the roof of the mouth, the inside of the gill rakers from the front. So like I say, literal perfect preserved specimen. You'll never see anything better than this ever, which is kind of crazy. And I got this for like $92, which is even crazier because this is a $1,000+ skull right here. So yeah, This is what perfection looks like. Not to brag or anything, because it's not like I preserved this. I just happened to get my hands on it. But to the guy who preserved this, like, he did an amazing job. So yeah, this is definitely my favorite skull in my collection. And yes, it is a real skull, so pretty awesome. So that's our blue catfish. Now for comparison, actually let me set this over on this side. For comparison with that blue catfish, we have this one, which this is a blue catfish as well. However, it is significantly larger. I put this one together myself. This is all the bones it had. Essentially everything I could find with that individual I put on, glued it together. So it's missing one of the barbel bones. Here's the one that's there. This one's missing. Missing the teeth, unfortunately, but you can still see, if I get it in focus, you can still see the tooth pads. You can see that there were once teeth in there. They just fell out. Once again, neurocranium right here. Kind of these cheek pieces, which that's where you would think the eye would be, but in reality it comes out here more. So the eye ring is missing. It'd be right here, and it'd curve out right about there. So that's where it would attach on from here to here. But like I say, it's not preserved in the wild almost ever. So this one, you can see the pectoral fin spines. These are, the total length is a little over 4 inches. You can see here they're not broken, and these are serrated. Once again, hate how I'm gonna have to do this, but I'm gonna have to tap on this to focus. There they are, serrated fin spines. You can see the serrations on there, so those will cut you open. It's not good at all to be stabbed by these. Front view, you can see it does not have the gill arches, so it's missing those entirely. However, it does still have some of the inside pieces. You can see the vertebrae here are still intact with some of the ribs. The dorsal fin spine is a good 5 inches. Very long. This one is not serrated. It's kind of like a switchblade in terms of like how it flips up and it can lock in place. Yeah, very interesting. From the back view, once again, there's no gill arches in there. There's no tooth pads on the roof of the mouth. But we do have this absolutely massive blue catfish skull. And this this individual would have been, well, actually I saw the whole body, so around 3.5 feet long, potentially 4 feet. Of course I didn't measure it, but this head here, from tip of the snout to the back of the head, is approximately like a little over 1 foot long. So it's a very large fish, especially for freshwater. But anyway, it's an impressive individual in terms of size, but it is nowhere near as complete as our smaller blue catfish. But yeah, so yeah, you can see this one's a lot bigger, but this one is much more complete. Okay, I'll move those to the side. And okay, next catfish we're going to look at. This one is a channel catfish. So this one, the thing is, I have a fake piece right here. So this is just created out of cardboard. So I was missing that piece. All the rest of the pieces are real that I have here. This is the real one right here on this side. So I did a decent job in recreating that. Anyway, top of the skull, you can see once again, we have the the pectoral fin spines. They are serrated. You see those serrations there. This one is missing the dorsal fin spine, which also would go a tiny bit farther back here. Once again, this piece is the complex vertebrae, this big chunk. All the other vertebrae go behind that and are much smaller. The neurocranium, these pieces which hold the tooth pads, the bottom jaw which would hold the teeth there. Eye ring would attach around here. So the eye is approximately where my finger is right here. Yeah, top view. underside view. This essentially is really good armor. This is where the pectoral fin spines attach onto. They fit neatly into a little groove, and they can slide in or out while the fish is alive. So that's our channel catfish, a much smaller species than the blue catfish. But other than that, they are very, very similar fish. They're in the same genus and very closely related. However, the blue catfish gets a lot larger at maximum size and even average size. Okay, next we will look at the flathead catfish. So here we have a flathead. So this one is a bit dirtier. I could potentially try to macerate this by putting it in some water and getting some of this flesh off. However, that's gross, and it's not too bad how it is. Like, it's really not that smelly and whatever. I mean, it's decent, so I kind of leave it how it is. Serrations, once again, this one has a dorsal fin spine. It's loose because it's held on by a tiny bit of skin. But there it is. Top of the skull. You can see these look like where the eyes would be, like I was saying. But once again, there's the eye ring that comes right here. Neurocranium, complex vertebrae, which is broken, it looks like. Quite a bit. Teeth would be going on to here. This one is missing the pieces that go on the top of the jaw. They hook on right here, and that's where the teeth would be on the top jaw, but I don't have those pieces. The barbel bone is also missing. But anyway, there's our slanted head friend, or frenemy, I guess, since these guys will kill people. These guys get longer than the blue catfish, however, not quite as heavy. And there's our front view again. Okay. Our next catfish we are going to look at is the black bullhead. This is essentially an individual of almost maximum size, pretty close to that. You can see the barbel bone here. I don't know what the actual term for that is, but we'll just call it that. You can see all of these teeth. All the teeth in here. All the teeth on the bottom jaw, and I didn't glue this together perfectly between the two halves, but whatever. Anyway, lots of little teeth. We have the dorsal fin spine up here. We have the ribs and the vertebrae. We have the complex vertebrae right here. We have the neurocranium, the pectoral fin spines. These are really sharp and really long on this individual, so it's pretty interesting. Like, the serrations are deadly. And here you can still see some of the fin rays here. Anyway, you would not want to get stabbed by these. There was a man who was impaled in the heart by a black bullhead when someone threw it to him, and he caught it like a football because people like to play catch with animals for whatever reason, and the guy died. So yeah, don't do that. Don't play catch with animals, especially not animals that have sharp enough weapons to easily kill you. Anyway, so decently sized catfish in terms of bullhead species, because a lot of the others are a lot smaller than this. This is a very large bullhead. So yeah, pretty cool. Okay. Then our next catfish, we have a skeleton of a bullhead. This is a yellow bullhead. This one, you can see all of those little teeth in there, super sharp. Probably would hurt to get bit by it. Tooth pads anyway, it could cause a rash. Anyway, we have the serrations on the pectoral fin spine. You can see here serrations on the front and the back, so that would not be good to be stabbed by. You can see why that would be dangerous. We we have the dorsal fin spine, complex vertebrae. Here we have the tail. However, it's missing the rays. It would be a bit longer if it had them. All the vertebrae and the neural spines. A bit of ribs here. Then we have the little head. So this head is probably 2.5 inches long, decently sized, kind of frog shaped, honestly, in terms of skull size, very round. You can see what looks like eyes, but once again, it would have the, actually that is about the placement of the eyes though on this individual, because actually the part that looked like eyes before was right here. But this one, it kind of lines up perfectly right there. And the little ring would curve right around there to make the perfect spot where the eye would be. So on this individual, that is exactly where the eye would be. So it's got his 2 little eyes there. This one does not have the gill arches preserved. You can see the underside here with those little serrated fin spines. You can see it does have the tooth pads. However, it is missing the barbel bones. But overall, it is pretty complete and decent. I got this for like $50, so it was worth it because for the price, that's amazing. So, yeah, pretty cool. Next, we have, okay, that is it for all of our North American catfish species. So now we are moving into other catfish. So we have, next we will go over the African Sharptooth catfish, which is obviously an African species. It is a type of walking catfish. So we'll get this one over here. So here's the main skull. These are the fin spines. They lock in place back here, kind of like that. But I didn't actually put it in its place. But anyway, that's how they fit on there onto the skull. You can see here that they have serrations as well running along here. You can, I'm gonna have to move this so it will focus. Okay. You can see that it looks kind of deformed and misshapen all over here, very weirdly shaped. This one is the same way, just very oddly shaped bone. That is because both of these have been broken at multiple points in the fish's life, and they regrow. This was most likely a fish that had been caught multiple times by fishermen who caught it in a net, and they ripped out the fin spines to get it out of the net, and then they tossed it back in the water, and the fin spines regrew, because catfish do that. And for whatever reason, people don't care to actually try to get the catfish out of the nets without injuring them. They just cut off or rip off the fins, because for them, that's the easiest way to get them out of the net. So it's just a thing that happens. I've witnessed it in person with some people who work for the State Department of Fish. So they just do it, and to them, it's no big deal. But that's why these are deformed, because they grew back weirdly. Because they're not going to grow back perfect. If you break a bone, it's going to not grow back the same. Anyway, those are the fin spines. Then we have the actual skull. So you'll notice this one is quite a bit different in terms of shape. First of all, it is a very slanted head. Now, if you've heard of the voodoo from River Monsters, I mean, technically the African Sharptooth catfish was in River Monsters too. However, they're very similar fish. The only way to tell them apart by the skull, I mean, essentially you really can't. So essentially you're just going to assume this is an African Sharptooth just based on the fact that they're much more commonly sold. Their skulls are going to be nearly identical and about the same size. So this would come from a 4-foot fish, potentially 4.5 foot. They're really elongated. So this skull is 10 inches long. And the thing is that, like, they have a very elongated body and they're very narrow. So they're kind of like an eel-like fish almost. The eyes are all the way forward here in the head. Then we have the front of the skull. This bone is differently shaped. You can see it only has one tooth pad. But there's the teeth in there. There's the teeth on the bottom jaw. Then you can see that it has a tooth pad on the roof of the mouth right here with all sorts of kind of more flat teeth in here. So that's pretty cool. It'd crush prey on the roof of its mouth like that. Then, like I say, the fin spines, they would attach on right here and right here. So they just kind of hook in there, and then fish can walk on land using them to kind of like waddle back and forth with them. But yeah, we have the complex vertebrae, and this guy is very weirdly shaped. It is this kind of long one here, the normal vertebrae. Top of the skull, you can see its brain would be around in here. But the main thing you'll notice, this one's more armored. It has all these chunks of armor. The whole thing is just solid bone. So it's much more like protected than some of the other species would be. Because yeah, its head's essentially solid bone. Just has one opening here, the eyes, the nose, and yeah. So it's a pretty interesting one. It has essentially a zygomatic arch right here like mammals have, because these two bones fuse and surround the eye. So that's pretty cool. You can see the bottom jaw is kind of separate in the terms that it attaches on here. The other one's is a bit different, more attachment points. But anyway, so pretty interesting fish. Like I say, it's not one of the ones you see every day unless you live in Africa and you fish for these. But they're pretty cool. There's photos of jaguars holding some 5-foot African sharptooth catfishes. I mean, not jaguars, leopards holding 5-foot sharptooth catfish. It's pretty cool. But yeah. And there are some species that have been introduced to Florida in the U.S. So they are invasive all sorts of places, but they're mostly found in Africa and Asia. So now for our last catfish, we have a tiny guy. So this one is a full skeleton, and I will have to grab it. Let's see. Okay. Here we have it. This is a young Plecostomus. So this is, just your typical pleco species. However, it is a very small one because obviously they grow a lot larger. I can put this on probably ×2 zoom if it will work. There we go. Okay. So we have the dorsal fin with that first spine, pectoral fin with the spine. You can see both of those there. Then we have the tail. We have all this armor covering the whole thing, essentially. You can see the eye socket and the nostril. The pelvic fins down there. If we flip this, actually we can do a front view. There's the front. You can see the nostrils. You can see the eyes. So there's that. Then if we flip this to look at the underside, here it is. So you can see it's kind of hollowed out here. That way there's no meat left inside. There's the pectoral girdle and the pelvic girdle there. Then you can see its little mouth. If I can get that to focus. You can see tiny little tooth pads. There's 4 of them in there. The little sucker mouth, which is really cool. Then you can see, yeah, the inside vertebrae in there. But yeah, this sucker mouth is really cool. Let's see if I can zoom in more on that. Yeah, look at that little sucker mouth. How cool is that? Yeah, very interesting. That's a really cool guy. Really nice to have. Okay, and that is it for our catfish. But now we will move on to our next group. Okay, so next we're going to look at the carp. So first we have the common carp, which is a European species. However, it was introduced to the US and is now invasive. So you can see the eye ring here, kind of goes around. The mouth is a sucker type mouth, so it's just gulping things up. Here's the eye ring on this side. You can see the underside with the kind of gill raker pieces in here. The operculum, which is kind of like the gill guard bone. And then, yeah, like I say, this weird suckery mouth, kind of creepy. Top of the skull, see all these patterns, kind of nose, nostrils up here. There's the gill arches intact, so there they are all in here. There's the back of the neurocranium. This is where the vertebrae attach on after this piece, which is the first vertebrae. And so you can see all the gill arches in there. Pretty cool. Obviously the eye holes. This would be from a fish a little over a foot long. So, our next fish for the carp family, this is the grass carp, which if you have heard of the grass carp, then you are thinking this is an absolute monster, because the grass carp is a species of Asian carp, and they're invasive in the U.S., just like all the other carp, the big carp anyway. European carp, I guess common carp, big head carp, silver carp, and grass carp, and I guess black carp too, I think. All those are invasive from Europe and Asia, so not native here. And this is the head alone from here to here is 8 inches. Then we have an additional 5 inches from this fin. So this is a 3.5 foot fish, which is absolutely crazy because they're not supposed to get anywhere near that size in the US because they're not even supposed to be here. And a year before I found this, I talked to the park rangers who said there were no Asian carp in the river I found this in. And then fast forward to a year later, and now we have this gigantic grass carp. So, like I say, 3.5 foot fish, big eye hole here. My thumb fits inside there. I have a big thumb. Nostril, the creepy little mouth with lips. So you can see those creepy little jaws. I don't know, super little tooth pad thing. They don't have teeth. They just have these little pads. It's really creepy. Covered in algae, obviously. That's why it's kind of greenish. Fins. From the underside, well, first of all, you can see I reconstructed some of it with cardboard just to keep the shape. So this is like a, what's the word I'm looking for? I don't know. It kind of replaces the operculum on this side, because the operculum here is this whole piece. So I kind of just reconstructed this side with this. And then the second piece in here to represent this piece. Anyway, you can see the inside there. So it has a very large neurocranium. Once again, as with our common carp, you will see this piece which sticks out, and then the vertebrae attach on right here. So very similar structure. So if we look at it from the other side view, you can see this eye is a lot bigger, but that's because it's missing some of the skin, and it's the bone's obviously not held in the same spot. So yeah, or actually, no, I was looking at that wrong. This is the eye down here. This is the nostril. So you can see just how massive that eyeball would have been when the fish was alive. Obviously, this is with skin covering it. This would be the raw eyeball with no skin. But anyway, very large fish. So like I say, that's the crazy thing, is just the sheer size of this grass carp. Because they should not be getting anywhere near this size. Like you can see in my hands, that literally is a handful. Like the whole fish was massive. I saw that whole body laying there on the side of the riverbank, and that was just crazy. Honestly, I might be able to clear all this off with like hydrogen peroxide, and that would make it look a lot nicer. I should try that. But anyway, crazy fish, because that is massive. So that is not something you would want to see in the wild, because it's not supposed to be there, and something of that size shows that the water quality is absolutely horrible, because if you have a fish getting that large that's not supposed to be there, something is going wrong, because the native fish are not going to be anywhere near the size they should be, because this thing is taking all the resources. These guys eat phytoplankton and zooplankton, so because of that, they are essentially taking all the food from the juvenile fish of other species, because almost all North American fish start out at birth feeding on phytoplankton and zooplankton as they grow. So these guys are essentially stealing all the food from the other fish when they're babies, so those fish can't grow up or get anywhere near as big, because this thing is eating them all. And something of this size would be creating an absolutely massive amount of eggs and producing more offspring, assuming this is a female. But either way, this is a massive fish. So, and yeah, if we compare this to common carp, you can see the size difference here. So there they are, relatively similar. The funny thing is their eyes are about the same size, as you will see. So that's kind of interesting. But yeah, both have a kind of similar mouth. However, the grass carp has a creepier kind of lip there. And I've caught some of those before. They're really weird. But yeah. So they're relatively similar, but they are different. They're in different genera. So, but yeah. Other than that, they're kind of similar in habits, but not quite the same. Okay, we'll move on to our next group now. Okay, so next we have the Gizzard shad, which is in the herring family. So here's this tiny little skull. Now this is not a fully grown adult. This is a super tiny little baby, because these guys, in the right conditions, can get up to 2 feet long. I've certainly seen some over 18 inches, which is pretty massive, but they do get bigger than that. You can see the large eye hole and the kind of shininess of the skull. They're very silvery fish, so pretty cool. Very flattened. They're like tall and thin, so pretty interesting. But you can see there's how thin they are, and there's the little mouth. So you can see that little jaw there. And then the eyes on both sides. This was one I just found dead on the shore. There were lots of them, because these are really weak fish, and essentially everything kills them. You can like use the tiniest amount of rotenone and kill all of these in the pond without affecting any of the other fish, because they are that delicate. A little bit of gill arches in there, but it's too hard to see because of the flatness of the skull. But this fish was around 3 inches long total, so they certainly get a lot bigger than that. But there's our little guy. These are planktivores, so these are something that would be getting their food stolen from the grass carp. So, but yeah, pretty cool though. Okay, so here we have the Pike-Perch, also called the Zander. Now, if you don't know what that is, it's a relative of the walleye. So I'm sure most, if not all of you watching, if you're fish people, you know what a walleye is. So this is essentially just a really close relative of the walleye. So you can see here it has the little obvious part of the maxilla there, that when you are looking at the live fish, the little lip kind of looking thing, we can see these much larger teeth than with the other fish we've been looking at. So it's got very large teeth here, kind of some medium size, some small ones, some bigger ones in the other places like the front there, and some on the roof of the mouth. It has serrated teeth and little, well, I guess not serrated teeth, but little serrations running across the length of the maxilla there. In our pre-maxilla up here, we have these big teeth and the smaller ones. We have an eye ring here that's very clear. The other side is unfortunately missing that, but on this side you can easily see that whole circle. Very large eyes, sight predator. Here we have the kind of side of the head area. This is the operculum piece, and gill arches are missing, but they would be in there. You can see the vertebrae attached on here, the neurocranium, the neurocranium here. There's the underside of the skull. You can see the jaw there. So that's that. But then if we take a closer look at the teeth, you will see, if I can get a good angle here, we have the teeth on the roof of the mouth. So we have one row here on the outside, another row on the inside. So you can see those extra rows in there with these bigger teeth that are on the inside of the mouth too. So you can get a really good look at all of those teeth in there of different sizes and shapes. So a very toothy fish. Would not want to get bit by this. That would hurt quite a bit and it would draw blood. So, I mean, it's not certainly not too dangerous of a fish, but it could still cause some damage. And, I mean, they get bigger than this, too. This is probably a medium-sized individual. But, yeah, they get bigger than this guy would. So, but, yeah, really nice teeth on this one. You can see all those big ones in there. Really cool. And top of the skull. Here's our front view. It honestly kind of reminds me of a snakehead a bit, but they look different. But similar to a snakehead, they're very toothy. It's got the little notch in the front there. But yeah, very interesting fish. Okay, next we'll take a look at the gar. So first we have the Florida gar. So this is around a 6-inch skull, maybe a little larger. So you'll see big eyes. This is a sight predator. This fish in real life would have been around 3 feet long. Very elongated fish. You can see the teeth on there. So this one has big teeth. You can see all the big ones, and then you can see all the smaller ones as well, lining the mouth. So on the bottom, there's some really tiny ones. If you open this up, there's some super tiny ones here, and then it's going to be really hard to see. I'm going to have to zoom in. There are, on the inside of the mouth, super tiny ones. You can see multiple rows of teeth. We have the ones on the inside, then the ones on the outside, and then, of course, the big ones. Top jaw, you can see the same thing. You can see how there's the big teeth, these little ones on the outside, and even more rows on the inside. So a lot of teeth. This has got to be close to probably 1,000 teeth. A whole lot of teeth. Let's see if I can get this. Nope, that didn't work. Okay. So here you can see the nostrils, all these holes and stuff. It essentially has sensory organs, electroreceptors that allow it to detect creatures in the water near it and help it to locate and strike at its prey when the water isn't exactly the clearest. So if it's murkier water, these guys can still find their prey thanks to the electroreceptors that are kind of like sharks have. Flat snout from this view, you can see from the top view, it's kind of rounded, kind of U-shaped in the front. It doesn't go straight to a point, kind of curves slightly. So that's a feature of these guys. Like I say, shorter snout. It looks kind of long, as you would say, like at first glance, or if you didn't know about the other species of gar, you'd be like, well, that looks like a long snout. But you wait till we get to the longnose gar, because this is actually relatively short snout, even though it looks kind of elongated. You can see the underside here. They have these really long bones that are kind of like a spike almost, that just go straight out here. It's really interesting. It's essentially a spike. You can see here, these are like all teeth on the roof of the mouth there. That's just crazy. From the back, you can see the vertebrae attached on here. Gar vertebrae are kind of weird. They're kind of smooth joints, kind of like Hero Factory Lego pieces, or I don't know if those are quite Legos, but anyway, the little joints that just pop together. That is exactly what the gar vertebrae are like. It is really weird. You can see the hole that leads to the brain case, the foramen magnum. Tiny little brain on these guys, but really interesting. Like the brain literally fits inside of this piece right here. That's it. Tiny brain. right in there. Front view, you can see teeth there. You can see more electroreceptors on the tip. You see those little tiny holes. Once again, you can get a good look at those rows of teeth. And the U-shaped snout, how it doesn't like go straight to a point. It's rounded. Yeah, so that is the Florida gar. There's also the short-nosed gar and the spotted gar, which have very similar shapes and sizes, like proportions to the Florida gar. But now we will look at the long nose, and you will see why I say that that snout is not long, because to the long-nosed gar, that is an absolute joke. This is the long-nosed gar. This is a 13-inch skull. This would be from an approximately 4.5 foot to 5 foot individual. So very, very large gar. You can see here, big teeth. They're still about the same size, honestly, as the Florida gars, even though this one's a lot larger. You can see this one has an overhang with the snout, so the bottom jaw is actually going under, like it tucks into the top jaw. Top jaw, there's the nostrils. Once again, the electroreceptors all over the tip of that and along the edges. So if we look at the mouth open, you can see lots and lots of teeth. You can see there are multiple rows of teeth. So once again, we have the big teeth, and then we have the littler ones, much smaller. On the inside, there's super, super tiny ones. On the bottom jaw, kind of same thing. There's the smaller ones, small ones on the outside, and then the larger ones in the middle. Yeah. Hold on, there's like a, if I can get this out, like a shed skin would be the larva. That was there since I got it. Okay. So, then, I can get this in there. I mean, there it is, it comes off. So there's our bottom jaw, there's our top jaw. Very prickly, but essentially there's joints right here and right here that this will fit into. So you just got to kind of shove that in place, and then it goes on like that, and then it will chomp down, chomp, 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 like that. Okay. So once again, there's our long-nosed gar, much longer. Snout lines up really well. Overhang here. We have these large eyes. So once again, it can use its sense of sight as well as its electroreceptors to find prey. There's the top view. This one is more of a V shape. It is very long and pointy. Comes to a point instead of being more rounded. Then you can see scales here on the back that are kind of diamond shaped. They're made of bone instead of being like other scales. They're ganoid scales, so they're literally bone, super tough armor, so it protects them from pretty much all the predators. If we compare these two, you can see even though this one is smaller, the Florida gar still has a wider snout than the long nose, even though it is less than half the size. Wider head. Overall, this one is more like uniform in terms of like the way it narrows. This one wide and then all of a sudden gets very narrow. This one just gradually slides like kind of the same pace as it gets smaller, whereas this one just wide and just all of a sudden gets very narrow. Once again, the Florida gar doesn't have quite as much of an overhang, still does, but not as much as the long-nosed gar here. You'll see their eyes are kind of proportionate to their body size, both very large for their size. But yeah, so there's our comparison between the two gar species that I have. I plan to eventually get the replica alligator gar. However, that one is like over $300, but it's 15 inches long, which means it is even larger than this guy, so that will be pretty dope. I'll get it eventually. But yeah, when I finally do, that will be epic. Okay, next group, moving on to. Okay, so those were our freshwater gar. Now we're going to move on to the saltwater gar, which is not actually a gar, but it is called that by many people. This one is actually a needlefish. They are known as saltwater gar, however, but the needlefish, an extremely dangerous fish. These guys will jump out of the water and impale people because they are attracted to lights. So when you combine a super speedy fish with something that has an extremely narrow and long beak, extremely sharp, this is going to easily go through a body. There's some pretty gross images of these things impaling people online. So if you want to find that, just look up needlefish injury, and they're all over the place on Google. But don't say I didn't warn you. It's kind of gross. Anyway, so the needlefish, this is the largest species called the houndfish. These guys get up to 6 feet long. This one would have come from a 5+ foot long individual. This is a 13-inch skull, so the same size as the Longnose Gar. Now, it is blue. That's the first thing you notice, I'm sure. That is the actual color they're supposed to be. Just needlefish have blue bones, which is pretty cool. Bluish green. I mean, you can see some shades of green, some shades of tealish blue, some darker blue, some greenish, some orange. It actually has a tongue here. The tongue is orange. And then it has some more whitish yellow, like typical bone color. Has the eye ring, so that's a sclerotic ring, which goes inside the eyeball. So that is the actual size of the eye right there. That's one of the coolest features of the skull, besides the color, is that it has both of the sclerotic rings preserved. So that is where the eyeball is. So, you know, if that's the living fish, there's the eye. Then you'll notice it has the fins. Again, these are taxidermy. There's no smell. So there they are. There's the fins. Top of the head, once again, it comes to a point, you know, like that's why it's so dangerous, because it's not blunt. This is sharp. This will easily go through you. Very pointed. When the mouth is shut, it perfectly interlocks. So you have a literal blade just jabbing through you at like 40 miles per hour, or however fast the fish is jumping. So pretty crazy, but they frequently jump out of the water, and they will easily kill you. So not a fun thing to be stabbed by. You can see here the kind of pieces that would be in the gills. So there they are. The vertebrae obviously are still here with a little bit of neural spines that are blue. The operculum piece, nice and shiny. We'll take a closer look at the jaws. So you can see even the teeth are blue. So kind of a pale blue color. They kind of have they're almost like cones. Like you can see here, there's like the top part and the bottom part, and they look different. They're different colors, and they are like the bottom part is actually thinner than halfway through on the top part. So they actually look very different for the overall tooth. Likely that is because the other part is in the gum line. However, I do not know for sure. But then you can see all these little teeth also, because it has all those little teeth running along the line of the jaw, just like the freshwater gars have. So just like the longnose and Florida gar, the houndfish has extremely tiny teeth running along the length of the jaws, along with the big ones. These guys, if you couldn't tell by the jaws, they're obviously predators. We even got like serrations right here on the corner of the jaw, so that will slice right through you. Even if this thing didn't jump from the water, even just getting bit by one of these would not be a pretty thing to have happen. Yeah, you can see when this is shut, it creates essentially an arrow coming to a point, both going inward that way and that way. So it is essentially a spike that will go straight into flesh. And that is not the intention of this, because obviously they do not have a goal of harming humans, but they end up doing it quite often because they're just attracted to light. So at night, if you're shining a light in the water, they will jump straight for it, and that means they impale you. So not good. Front view, you can see kind of funny looking fish. There's a tongue in there. You can see that kind of curled a little bit. But You can see it can't really see in front of it very well. It's going to be seeing on both sides of it at the same time. Its eyes essentially have very limited front view vision. Honestly, kind of reminds me of Mosasaurus. I don't know why. I don't know, something about it. But you can see the inside of the jaw here. It's kind of cool. It's like the two halves kind of fuse with these little tiny pieces in here, which is really cool looking. I don't know why it's like that, but it is kind of weird. Yeah, really interesting. Once again, there's the underside of those pieces. So I don't know, it's a really interesting and weird skull at the same time. Really cool, and like I say, the color makes it even more cool. So it's one of the coolest skulls in my collection. Although my favorite is probably still got to be the blue catfish that's complete and all that. But this one is a close second, probably. Really awesome. Yeah, pretty awesome fish. Like, just the fact that it's blue, the size, all of that, even the eye rings, this makes this an amazing skull to have. Definitely worth a lot more than what I bought it for. So, yeah, really cool. So that is our houndfish, the biggest species of needlefish. Okay, next we have the largest skull in my collection in terms of length. Obviously not in weight. That would be either my bison skulls or my cow skull. But anyway, the longest skull in my collection, this is a 2-foot long paddlefish skull. The total length of the animal would be over 5 feet long when it was alive. So paddlefish, here I have to hold it all the way out here so you can see the full thing on screen, because that's how big it is. Really interesting skull. So these are planktivores, feeding only on plankton. Kind of like a whale shark. They hold their mouth really wide. The mouth would essentially be down here, kind of open up really wide here. Very big animal. And you can see here why it's called the paddlefish. This is also called the spoonbill because of this really wide bill in front, its little paddle, which is really intricate. You can see all of these little fibers, and this is actually cartilage, not bone. But anyway, you can see how delicate and how intricate that is. All these little tiny pieces, which is absolutely crazy. Like, each one of these is a separate little piece, which is just crazy. Anyway, these are filled with electroreceptors, so this is how it detects its prey, which is kind of interesting because it feeds on plankton. But I mean, whale sharks technically have electroreceptors too, considering that they're sharks. So I guess they just use those to find the spots with the most plankton, which is kind of cool. Anyway, yeah, we got this thing at the widest point, around 4 inches wide. Not quite 4 inches, but pretty close. It's a little bit narrow at the front and narrows back. It's really sharp along the edges. Like, if I were to run that really fast while holding down, it would cut me open. You can see this main central kind of blade, almost like a swordfish, but then all of the cartilage parts come off of that. Here you can see the brain would be in here. The eyes are actually around here, I think. They're relatively, like, the back of the skull is over here. So you have the whole animal like that. And then the mouth is going to stop probably right about here. And it's just going to go really far down and gulp all of the plankton in the area. A really big mouth, like a megamouth shark, basking shark, whale shark, any of the sharks like that. Essentially, that is what this mouth is like. Now, they are not a shark, but they are a cartilaginous fish. And they live in the freshwater. So this is their last freshwater fish skull. The rest back here are all saltwater. Yeah, we have these big gaps in the skull there to make it lightweight. You can also see, it might be hard to see, but it actually kind of curves. So instead of being straight going forward, it actually kind of curves like this. Slightly, obviously not that much, but it does slightly curve towards the side instead of being perfectly straight. So that is an interesting thing about it. The underside is not too much different than the top side, at least in the front area. But you can see here the back side is a bit different. Yeah, this is a very cool skull. This is my most expensive skull in my collection. This is the only skull I've ever spent more than $200 on. This is, I mean, I guess technically I haven't spent more than $200 because this was an exactly $200 skull. But yes, this is the most expensive skull in my collection. However, it is not my most valuable because, like I say, that catfish skull is easily over $1,000, potentially 1.5 thousand, 1,500. Anyway, so that one's more expensive. Some of the others are worth more. However, this one was the most expensive one that I paid for. Like I said, I mean, I paid for others that have been worth more, but they were cheaper than this guy. So very expensive skull. There's certainly, you can get some of these for $30, but they're really bad condition and super smelly. But yeah, if you get them from the right people, it's going to be around 200, maybe a tiny bit cheaper, like 175. But either way, expensive skull. I've only ever spent $200 on a skull twice. Once on this, once on an entire skeleton of my crested gecko that I sent to get skeletonized. That was $200. It was $25 per inch. So yeah. But expensive skull, but it's really massive, really cool, and you don't get a chance to have one of these or really get to look at one every day. So it's really cool. Like I say, it's 2 feet long, so massive fish, massive skull, pretty crazy. And yeah, that's our paddlefish. So that's pretty cool. We'll move on now. Okay, so now we have our toothy saltwater fish. So if I asked you what you thought this was, you would probably say it's a barracuda, which is a good guess, but this is actually a largehead hairtail. The main difference between it and the barracuda, which I can show you later, these guys only have 1 row of teeth on the top and the bottom. Barracuda is actually quite a few rows of teeth, but if you look at this, you will see these teeth are set directly along the jaw. There's some growing in. You can see by my fingernail right here, there's one growing in. But essentially, these are literally attached right into the jaw on both the top and bottom jaw. There is no room for extra teeth anywhere. They're all just this 1 row. Yeah, you can see all the ones growing in here. All the ones that fell out are essentially growing in. And it has these really long ones here towards the front on the top of the jaw. Kind of an interesting pattern and arrangement of the teeth, just the way they curve. But that would be very good grippers for eating other fish. Just bites down on them and holds them. Honestly, could probably chop them in half. They are the tiniest bit serrated, so yes, that would easily slice through anything it bites down on. So I would bet a finger could easily get sliced off if this thing were to bite down on it. So do not mess with these guys in the wild. These guys get a lot bigger than this. This is a medium-sized individual. This fish would probably be around 3 feet long. They can get bigger than that though. You can see big eye right here. The eye ring would be about here, so it's certainly smaller than the whole eye socket. There's the top of the skull. The brain case is right here, neurocranium. But yeah, you can see the vertebrae in the back, the operculum piece. It's a really flat skull, like, you can tell from both the top and the bottom, and especially the front view, that it is very tall and narrow fish. So kind of flat, just like the gizzard shad in terms of shape. Back view, you can see once again there are no preserved gill rakers. But yeah, I mean, the main thing to notice on this guy is just the size of the teeth, because these are very toothy fish. And like I say, the other thing of key notice is that it just has 1 row of teeth, which is a very interesting feature because there's not very many fish that just have 1 row of teeth. So that's a thing that sets it notably apart from the barracuda. Now this is nowhere near a complete barracuda skull. We are missing the eye ring. We're missing this jaw piece. We are missing all sorts of other jaw pieces. It does have the kind of throat piece, which is cool, but it is missing quite a bit of pieces. It does have the tongue bone, which is cool. You can see that there. There's now a fruit fly flying in my face. I don't know why it's in my room, because there's no fruit, but whatever. Man, I had a fruit fly land in my dad's pizza today, and he got upset because it was stuck in the sauce. It was the funniest thing ever. He had to get a Kleenex and just grab it out of there. He was so pissed. But yeah, and the funnier thing is it keeps flying around my camera, like on the backside. I don't know why, but it chose to. Well, I don't know. Maybe I can kill it, maybe not. I might eventually get it. Anyway, so if we want to compare these, you'll see, first of all, I'll show you the Barracuda to show you, yes, there's multiple rows. So right here, the jaw itself is serrated. We have these tiny little teeth running along the edge. Then we have these big teeth on the roof of the mouth. These larger teeth here. The bottom jaw has these very large teeth. Now, on the bottom jaw, you will notice, let me zoom in. You will notice that these are attached to the jaw in the same way that the Largehead hairtails were. Then there's the little smaller teeth here. The one in the front that kind of looks fused from the from the side because they kind of line up. This one's not perfectly, but usually they kind of fuse together, which is interesting. Top jaw, you can see all of those teeth there. Very large ones, but then, yes, serrated. This would easily slice through you if I were to push down hard. That would not be good. You can see it's missing some teeth there and there. And then, yeah, we have these smaller ones in the back here on the roof of the mouth, growing in there that I can't really reach with my thumb. But yeah, so that is the main difference between the Barracuda and the Largehead hairtail in terms of dentition, because once again, this guy does not have any serrations on the jaw, extra rows of teeth, nothing like that, and this one does. So you can see the difference there. But also you'll notice they're very, very similar in terms of teeth, because not only do they both have these weird ones on the bottom jaw like that, they also have these very big ones towards the middle. So it's very interesting that these guys are so similar, because they're not, like, this is not a species of Barracuda, but it is very similar in terms of tooth structure. However, the skull shape is quite a bit different, because you'll notice the Barracuda is a lot wider. The Barracuda does not have a really narrow skull. Like, sure, it's still, that fruit fly just went up my nose. Wow. And I couldn't even do anything about it because both my hands were filled, but I snorted out whatever. I don't know where it went. Hopefully it's not in there anymore, because that would be disgusting. So that's a fun moment for you guys. Crazy. Ugh. Wow. Okay. Like I was saying, you can see the Barracuda has a lot wider of a skull. It's a wider of a fish, more circular, torpedo shape, whereas this guy is more flat. So this is the torpedo one. This is the kind of blade-like one. This is more like a sword almost, you can think of, like that. Barracuda eyes are pretty big. The eye ring would be about here, so not quite the full size of that. Brain case here. Here's the neurocranium. The vertebrae, of course, here. These kind of little fringe things. This throat piece here, which is kind of interesting. Took me forever to figure out that that's where it goes, because I had to put this together myself from all the pieces. But luckily, I found an image on Google that showed this bone. It showed the underside view of a Barracuda skull, and that was extremely helpful, because now I know it goes there. The operculum pieces here. But yeah, very toothy fish. Once again, here's the tongue bone. Kind of cool that they have that. But yeah, these guys have killed 3 people ever in attacks. However, what was it, like 50 people a year die from eating Barracuda meat because of MRNS, if that's the correct term. I totally forget. It's been a while since I've worked on 72 Dangerous Animals prehistory. Not prehistory, 72 Dangerous Animals fish. So whenever I worked on that, I think that was episode 1. That was a while ago, like 8 months ago, somewhere in there. So, but anyway, a lot of people die every year from eating Barracuda meat due to disease. Not good. Oh, it's MRSA. That's what it is. MRSA. Anyway, there's our top view again. Underside view. Both side views. And yeah, toothy fish. Don't want to get attacked by these. Okay, and that is it for our kind of elongated toothy fish. Next, we can move on to our last kind of super toothy fish, at least in terms of sharp teeth, which is the monkfish. So this is the monkfish skull. The monkfish is a type of anglerfish, which is cool. You can see it actually has a little antenna here. I don't even know what the heck you're supposed to call those, lures. I don't know what the actual term is. But anyway, it has the lures on there. And you'll see it's very toothy. It has these teeth up in, like, these are essentially, like, the eyes are right here. So this is crazy that it has these teeth right under the eye. Really big teeth too. You can see it's a very toothy fish. Very long teeth. It's actually missing a piece right here that has more teeth. But anyway, a very, very toothy fish. Here's the side view. You can see it's relatively kind of a flattened fish. Very wide head. The front view there, once again, wide and flat. But yeah, the thing is, there's one of these for sale right now for around $300. It's on sale. Normally it'd be like $500, but if one of you wants to go out and buy it, I certainly do not have enough money for it. But it is a 13-inch long monkfish skull. This one is only like 5 inches, so it is essentially something that is much, much larger than this. It is ridiculous how much bigger it is. There's a photo of it on Etsy sitting on top of a ruler, and it is bigger than the ruler. So if you see that and you have $500 or more dollars and you decide that's what you want, please go buy it because it needs to go to a cool home. So it'd be awesome if somebody would find that and buy it because it's been on there forever. And I feel bad for the seller because no one's going to buy it. But it is super, super cool and massive. So like this, but a lot bigger. A lot bigger. Because, like, actually, here's a ruler that I have right with me. So there it is. Here's mine on the ruler. So there's about 5 inches. And it would be all the way back here. You can see how much bigger that skull is. It's tall. It's massive. Huge lures. It is a massive anglerfish skull. So this is the American monkfish. There's multiple species of monkfish. So anyway, the American monkfish. You can see the brain case here. It's really delicate. I'm assuming this skull is bleached as opposed to peroxided because bleach will damage the bones long term and make them more fragile. And this is a very, very delicate skull. It could be just because, like, delicate just because it's a deep sea fish and they have more delicate skulls in general. But it also could be because they bleached it. I just don't know. Also, it's much more white than my other skulls. So that's another reason I think either they bleached it or they just over peroxided it, left it in way too long. But yeah, you can see all those teeth there. Super cool. Really long teeth. So yeah. But anyway, I mean, you can just see all the, like, teeth here, teeth there, then the under. The bottom jaw, which has multiple rows also, you can see there's multiple rows in here alone, just in these areas. So very cool fish. This was actually expensive. I mean, maybe you would expect it to be like this was around, I think, $80 or $90, which is kind of expensive in terms of, like, for the size, but I guess you could expect that considering it's a pretty cool fish. It's just I've gotten some bigger than this for cheaper, like the African Sharptooth catfish was $50 for that 10-inch skull. Total steal. Very good deal. But yeah, so there it is. Once again, there's our little lures on top. Curve forward a bit. So that is our monkfish. Okay, next, our last two, we have the European conger eel and the Atlantic wolffish. Wolffish are not actually eels. They look kind of like them, but they're their own thing. They're just called wolffish. As you may have guessed, they're just their own group. And the conger eel is a type of European eel. So that is these two. We'll look at those next. Okay, so first up, we have the European conger eel. So these guys, the biggest one on record was around, I think, 8 feet long, potentially 10 feet if I do not remember for sure, but either way, they are bigger than a person in terms of length. Here you can see this very interestingly shaped operculum. Very thin, narrow cranium on top. The back is obviously much wider than the front. It gets really narrow. The underside, you can see once again, there's that Neurocranium, that really weird long bone too. Vertebrae attached on there. You'll see, let me do a closer zoom. It has these teeth. Now these, they're not sharp, they are peg-like. It's obviously missing some here and there, but if you look at them overall, they're very flat on top, kind of shaped like human incisors, or even other like mammal incisors, like the carnivore incisors, like maybe like a weasel or a skunk or something. So that's kind of interesting. But yeah, you'll notice they're very flat and peg-like. So that's an interesting feature here of these guys. The front teeth, you'll notice there is a little tooth pad here. These ones are actually sharp. So the ones here curve backwards and are pointy. So you can actually see all the ones in the roof of the mouth there, and they're kind of some that go all along here. All of those are sharp and curved backwards, whereas the ones on the outside are blunt and flat and peg-like. So that's an interesting thing there. The jaws, relatively large, and we have the eyes, which would be around here. So very forward-facing, like very forward-placed eyes. Triangular head, you can see there. It's a very triangular shape. Comes to a point here in the front. With the mouth closed, it'd be more rounded in terms of top and bottom view. But yeah, very interesting skull. So like I say, this is a true eel, so it's an actual eel species. Very large eel. This is a very small one. This one would be 3.5 or 4 feet long, so not small, but nowhere near as large as the biggest ones. So the biggest conger eels are going to be a lot larger than this. Their head's probably twice or more longer. So that'd be pretty cool to see. It's always cool to see big skulls like that of fish. Also, it'd be cool to see a baby one of these. Like imagine an inch-long version of this. That'd be adorable. It'd look a lot different though, because eel larvae are very different than adults. Anyway, very cool fish. There's our front view. Kind of interesting there. But yeah, kind of looks like little eyes up there. But yeah, that is our front view there for the conger eel. Then our not a real eel, the Atlantic wolffish. So this one has much bigger teeth, and it is a heterodont. Homodont would mean it would have all its teeth look the same, but they do not. So we have these big teeth in the front. We have some really narrow ones, some really thin and narrow teeth. Yeah. Okay. So essentially some really thin ones, some larger ones. On the roof of the mouth, you can see it also has some, like a really thin one right here, thin one. These thicker ones, some attached onto the maxilla and premaxilla here. If I found just a bone on the beach that was literally just like this piece and then some teeth, that'd be weird, because you can see this is a separate piece than the rest of the skull. So imagine just finding this right here together, or just one half of that. Wouldn't really know what that is. But yeah, this is a clear eye ring here. Obvious eyes on the top, so you can definitely tell this is where the eyes are. They're kind of forward and top facing, so like it can see relatively like to the side and up, which is kind of cool. We have the neurocranium here. You can tell this was actually how it died. It got crunched probably with either someone with like pliers or something, just snap the brain case, because this brain would be right in here, and it's kind of, you can see a line through there, and it's actually kind of curved to the side. So somebody, it looks like someone just got pliers and snipped right there, and that killed the fish. And of course, it's probably someone harvesting for meat. The skull was a byproduct, so they got that all clean and nice. Vertebrae attach on right here. We have the lower jaw here, which would slide upwards. I just realized I'm 2 times still. Okay, there it is. Lower jaw would slide upwards, so it's essentially his face would be like this, and this one slides up to meet in line with this. And once again, with the heterodont thing, sharp teeth here. Then we have these molars, essentially flat for crushing. They're kind of rough. But yeah, these would crush up shellfish and crabs and stuff. Top of the mouth, you have these slightly spikier molars, and then these really flat ones in the center of the roof of the mouth. So these guys will eat crabs. I'm sure you've seen that video of the guy who just catches wolffish and crabs in his traps and just feeds the crabs to the wolffish before letting the wolffish go. So yeah, that's how they crush them up with these. Just crush those guys straight up with these and these. Sharp teeth for grabbing. But yeah, really cool species. Very interesting fish. Once again, not an eel, but they are their own type of thing called wolffish. So yeah, pretty cool. That is our wolffish. There's our kind of front view. Really weird looking skull, honestly. It's one of those that once you like learn what it is, it should be instantly recognizable just in terms of shape and everything. Like there's nothing else like it. Wolffish are their own thing. So very unique, very cool. Like I say, it has both the sharp teeth and the flat ones for crushing. He's kind of in the middle between sharp and flat. Probably would hurt a lot to get bit by one of these. But yeah. So pretty cool. And like I say, that is our last two here. So that is all of my fish collection, excluding the sharks and rays and skates. I have, I think, over 20 species of shark plus or maybe it's not 20 species, but 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. Okay, 15 species of shark jaw and 1 skate jaw. So those will be in a separate video. But for now, that is all of my fish. So thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you in part 3 and eventually part 4. See you next time. Bye.